Now that I have a solution file, I can start to place projects into the solution. A project in Visual Studio and .NET is the first place where I can write my code and compile that code into something that I can run and execute or host in a web server. So the first project I want to add to the solution is the project that will represent my web application. It will contain all the code that I need to respond to requests from a browser or respond to requests from a client as part of an API. It will contain all the codes that I need to respond to requests from a browser or respond to requests from a client as part of an API, and return HTML or JSON or images or JavaScript, whatever I needed to return from this web application. So let's right click on the solution, go click Add and click on New Projects. Once I select this option, this should open a dialog box that again will see this list of standard templates you can use in Visual Studio. And what I want to do is to create a web project based on the C# language. So I'm going to filter by the language of C#. Finally, I want to create an ASP.NET web application that is built on ASP.NET Framework. I'm going to select that option and create OK. After giving the name Ode Food Project, press OK. So again, I want this project to be Ode to food.web. So this is part of the larger solution for Ode to food. So click ASP.NET web application, press OK. Now you will, and the larger solution is a system and application that is designed to deliver restaurant information to the end user. But this is specific project represents the web user interface portion of the solution to deliver restaurant information to the end user. You might create a separate project to host all the classes and code related to data access for your application. You might have separate project for unit tests. So I'm going to stick with a relatively straightforward solution. I'm going to create a dedicated project here for the web application, and I'm going to place it underneath the Ode to Food directory. So click on MVC and press OK. So this will create the project. So here I have used the latest version of .NET Framework, which is version 4.7.2, and for the most part, there are no major challenges planned for the ASP.NET MVC framework. So if you want to try using a later, newer version of the .NET framework, feel free to try that. But if you want to be as compatible as possible with the code that I am writing, you also might want to stick with .NET Framework 4.7.2. Okay, so the template that I have used is the MVC project template, which is oriented towards building a web application that's going to have a user interface, and that's slightly different from the normal web API project. This also builds on ASP.NET web applications, but everything is a little more oriented towards building an API. So something that's going to send and receive JSON and XML. You can add a user interface to a web API project, and you can add an API on to an MVC project, which we are doing now. So these choices aren't entirely exclusive, but I'm going to start with the MVC project. There's also an example of how to build a single page application. We'll take a look at some of these other project types later in this course. But right now, we are going to build an MVC application. I do want to configure this project for HTTPS. We're not going to start off with Docker support, but that is very easy to add later, the Docker part. I'm just going to click Create. Visual Studio will need to think a bit, so It's taking time, but eventually when this dialog completes back in Visual Studio and the Solution Explorer menu, I should now have the solution and the Order to Web projects. Inside this project are a number of folders that we'll be talking about throughout this course. There's also a .cs file here. As you can see, there is a .cs file which represents the code behind this application. And the first thing I'm going to do is, just to make sure that everything is working correctly, is I'm going to go to the build menu and say that I want to build this entire solution. So click on here. This will force Visual Studio to use MS Build tool to run the C# compiler across all of the codes here. And I can see I have successfully built one project. So here I've successfully built one project. It is built into what we call an assembly, the order2food.dll assembly. So that contains compiled code from my application. And if you want more details about the compiler and C#, then please go and watch my video C# fundamental course. But for now, the next thing I want to do is come into the So as you can see here, build 1 succeeded. So what we are going to do is we are going to see this application on our web browser. To do this, just go here. So choose the browser you want. So you can choose Mozilla Firefox if it is available there. So press and it will open the browser. So when I press run, the browser will go ahead and send off a request to the localhost, and the localhost will display the page. So here you can see is already a pre-built page and my application is up and running successfully. So this is the end of today's lesson. So stay tuned for the next video.